Thanks for coming. We're going to talk about the National Bike and Pedestrian Documentation Project. So this is the training to help you go out in the community and volunteer and help us get counts so that we can figure out who's using bike and pedestrian pathways, collect a lot of information that'll be helpful for a lot of pieces down the road, but I will sort of talk about that as we go along. Asheville has been participating in the bike and pedestrian process since 2009. So we are continuing to collect data that can be compared to years past. It is standardized so we can compare with other communities that look like ours or don't look like ours. We have decades of data on motor vehicle travel, so we can, when a new grocery store is coming in, we can estimate what it's going to do to traffic patterns. We can't do that very well with bike and pedestrian traffic because we just don't have that much data. So that's sort of what this collection process goes towards. It lets us paint the picture and talk a little bit more about non-motor vehicle traffic in our community. That's the general background of this. If you'd like more, there is a website dedicated to the Bike and Pedestrian Documentation Project, and you can find it if you just Google National Bike and Pedestrian Documentation Project. That'll get you there. It's the #1 hit because I can never remember the address off the top of my head, but it's the first one on there. So you can get more background and information on that if you'd like. But what we're going to spend our time on today is really the meat of the volunteer process. So what you need to do when you go out in the community and how you need to collect information. So the first one is really what you need to bring. You're going to be out there for 2 hours. Use the restroom before you go because you may not have access to one wherever you're counting. You'll want to bring your, it says safety vest, but bring brightly lit clothes because you'll be at an intersection. You want to be easily visible to anybody coming through there. So safety vest or lime green shirt, whatever you want to do. Count forms, I'll be handing those out to volunteers who come in person to my office. I will also be posting it online, and we can also email those out to you if you like. I will probably do that as well. Even if I've seen you, I will email you the form, a PDF copy of it, as well as your assignment. You'll want a clipboard because you'll be writing, so you need something with a hard back. You'll need a pencil or a pen in order to do your counts. You will need a watch or some type of timer. You'll be there for 2 hours, but each count sheet you'll see on your count form requires you to move along every 15 minutes. It makes it a little bit easier to organize the data and keep a count, so you'll need to know when to move ahead. I am your volunteer coordinator. I'm sorry I can't edit this. It's a PDF, but I will be available. My email address is lstradle@unca.edu, and my phone number is 258-7711. So you can contact me directly with any questions. Depending on the weather, you'll just make sure you dress appropriately to be out there for 2 hours. So you may need sunscreen, you may need a jacket, you may need less clothes because you never know in September in Asheville. You'll probably want some kind of chair. Most of the intersections don't have any kind of seating. There are a couple in communities that have benches, but they're few and far between. So if you want to sit down during this process, bring your own chair. And if you're like me and you can't go 2 hours without eating, bring yourself a snack. There are 2 different types that you'll see on the website for this, 2 different types of counts. We focus on sort of a modified screen line count. We are not asking you to count who's passing through the intersection how. We really just want to know the sum total of who is coming to and going out of the intersection. So what we're doing is sort of a modified screen line count. This is what your form looks like. The most important thing, I do want you to make sure you have your name on it in case there's something I can't understand when we're pulling the data collection back together. I can reach out to you and ask for explanation. You need to put your intersection in here as well. The date that you counted, the time that you were there, and the weather conditions. That does affect the algorithm. If it's sunny and beautiful or if it's rainy and gray, it matters. We're asking you, for example, if you're counting in the evening, we're asking you to count from 5 to 7. If you get there at 5:05, it doesn't mean to scrap it. You just need to let us know what time you started and what time you ended. So about 15 minutes in either direction is fine, as long as you write down when you started and when you ended. And the date, of course. So sorry, many of you have seen some confusion. I've posted different dates because I was calling Tuesday the 15th when it's really the 16th. So our date count for this is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which are September 16th, 17th, and 18th. There's no statistical difference in counts between those days, so the day that you choose is up to you. Just that if you're counting on a weekday, it happens on one of those 3 days. So you don't have to count the same site more than once. Each site gets counted one time on one of those 3 days. So that's why the date is important, to make sure we know when you were out there, because we aren't assigning that, if that makes any sense. And then some of the details that you'll see, here's that 15-minute increment. So you'll start in the first 15 minutes. We're asking you to count bicycles, pedestrians, and others. We'll go through that in just a little bit on what other might be. We're asking you in your best estimate to count who's male and female in this. And again, sometimes you can't tell when there's a helmet on. Just do your best guess if you have to. And then on our form, which you can't see on this, we are asking you to collect information on whether or not our cyclists are wearing helmets. So the trick there usually is you count all the people who are not wearing them, because we tend to have more actual people wearing helmets, which is nice, and then you can do the math and figure out how many were not wearing them. So you can choose however best to count. Some of the intersections will be very nice and relaxing count, where you hash mark as people come through, and some will be a vicious, how fast can I hash, as people come through busy intersections during peak hours between 5 and 7 at night, for example. I'll go into some more detail about what others might be, but since this is the bicycle and pedestrian count, there are some things that don't fit well in that. So others might include skateboarders or rollerbladers. So that's some of the different information you might see out there. So your subjects are the people out there. You may have some questions when you're sitting there. People may ask you what you're doing or why you're out there. And so just having a little bit of information to share with them, and you can always direct them to me or to Barb Me with the city. You can also direct them to the National Bike and Pedestrian Count site and then say, next year you can volunteer. So generally people are just curious about what you're doing. I've not heard of any negative confrontations or concerns, but people are curious if you're sitting there with some paper out marking. All right, so now it's quiz time. And for those of you who are watching this online, you'll also have access to the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to play along. So can you see this very well? How many do you think that would be? That's right, so 5, and I'll make you guys say it out loud next time. But we have 5 people who are actually pedaling, and there's also an infant in a carrier in the back. That infant counts. I'm sorry, 4 people riding and 1 infant in the carrier. So that's a total of 5 people, because that person is technically on a bike. All right, how about this one? Again, it's a little bit
2? What's on the back of that?
It is 2. There seems to be a motorcycle in the picture.
Gotcha.
That's not him. So yes, as horribly unsafe as this is, with no helmets and riding up on front, that's 2 people in your count. So you'll hash twice for that count for a cyclist. Other, good. You were paying attention during the earlier event. That person is on rollerblades. I haven't seen a lot of those lately, but maybe you will see some out there. But again, other, because they are on wheels, but they are not bicycle wheels. Those were just a few quick examples. There are quite a few others that you're going to see. For example, we live in Asheville, and so we have interesting people on interesting modes of transportation all the time. I would say the question that comes up the most often is the pub cycle. So how does the pub cycle count? We are saying for the most important is consistency. So we're saying the pub cycle counts. Everyone with a pair of feet on a pair of pedals is going to be counted. I believe the pub cycle seats 13. I was looking it up for another reason. But for that, for your knowledge there is a section at the bottom of your count that says notes. If there's ever anything that you don't really know or you feel like you want to tell us about, like if, for example, you forget about this part about the pub cycle, and you choose to count it or not to count it, but you're not really sure what the standard is, you can write down here, pub cycle came through my intersection, there were 13 people on it, but I did not count them, or something like that, so that you can help us have enough information to incorporate it back into the data if we need to. So that is the quick overview of what we're doing. I didn't do, I want to go back really quickly on the screen line when I said it's the comings and goings of the intersection that you're in. And so one of the questions that we've had in the past is about what counts as entering the intersection. So basically, it's really easy if someone walks up to your intersection, crosses the street, and walks out the other side. That one seems clear. But sometimes you may have people come up and get on a bus and go without ever crossing the intersection, or you may have people get off a bus and walk away, and does that count? Basically, if they come into contact with the intersection, they count. Maybe somebody's walking towards the intersection, this could easily be me, they get to the intersection, realize they've forgotten their wallet, turn around and go home, they count. When they come back with their wallet this time, they count again. So every time there is a person who passes through your intersection, they count. And it doesn't matter how many times. If someone walks up to a store, gets what they need, and comes back through, they count twice because they're coming through the intersection twice. So with that said, those are my tips and background information. What other questions do you have that I can answer? Aubrey?
What if you have a woman who's pushing a stroller? Is the baby in the stroller a pedestrian?
Yes, they both count as pedestrians. So there's no bicycle involved, but there are two people. And that's, people is important. Humans count. So someone brought up earlier that sometimes you may see someone pushing a stroller and it turns out that there's a small dog inside. The small dog does not count. So to the best of your ability, glance in, see if it's a human. But if you can't see, you can't see. All of this is to the best of your ability.
You said something about being dressed in bright colors. I'm not standing in the street, am I?
Good question. You should stand at a safe place outside of the intersection where you can clearly see all parts of the intersection. So you should not be in the road, but because some of you will be at some of the busiest intersections in town, it's still good to make sure that you can clearly be seen. So yes, please stay in a safe place where you have a good vantage point. And that'll be up to you to decide where you can see. And you may find that you sit down and you start counting and you realize you can't see very well. It's okay to get up and move. You don't have to stay right in that spot. Just make sure that you can, number one, be safe. Number two, see clearly.
If I'm in an intersection that goes in a cross or has 5 legs or anything, do I count all the sides or just the ones passing?
That cross through?
Yeah. Do I count them when they're coming from the other streets into the intersection?
Yes, absolutely. If it is all one intersection. If you are sitting at a crossroads and then maybe 200 feet down is another road, that happens quite a bit in Asheville. We have a lot of little roads aside. Only your intersection. So if you have an intersection that has, let's say, for example, where Depot Street, when you're in the River Arts District, when it's that intersection that has the 2 prongs come off, that is all one intersection. So everything coming through that intersection counts. If you are, let's say, trying to think of another good one, where there's a good example of 2 close roads. Let's say that you are on Merriman Avenue and you are at, let's see, I'm trying to think where there are 2 close streets, Chestnut and...
The next one where like Trader Joe's.
Yes, the next one, I'm going to blank on the names. You can see both of those intersections from either of those intersections, if that is clear. You should only be counting the ones that cross through your intersection. Hopefully you can make a good judgment call and see what really constitutes your intersection. And there are some complicated ones. For example, one of our volunteers will be down at W.T. Weaver, where the roundabout is, and the University Heights comes off of that. And then there's also a greenway that comes through. So that's probably one of the most complicated intersections. And so you're going to see everybody that comes through that hub counts. That is the intersection. Good question. One that I will forget that comes up sometimes is, or that I have forgotten, is if someone comes to your intersection that is using an assistive device like a scooter or something that's motorized, the motorized assistive devices don't count. However, someone using a wheelchair that is hand-driven is a pedestrian. I will
If
ask
I'm in
the
an
audience.
electric wheelchair, I count. don't I?
Yes, I'm sorry. An electric wheelchair does count. Yes. The actual like scooter devices that are not wheelchairs don't count as a pedestrian. But if you're using an assistive device, like a wheelchair or a motorized wheelchair, they both count. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Any other questions before we wrap up? And I will be in direct contact with each individual volunteer to confirm your location and to reconfirm the times. Again, it is your choice what day of the week that you do it, whether you'll be assigned either evening or morning depending on what your preferences were, but the day of the week is up to you, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. If you did choose a Saturday location, there's only one time and one day that you can count. It will be a Saturday morning, and I'll confirm that with you. But again, I'll reach out to each volunteer individually to make sure you have all the information that you need. All right.